Every week, my colleagues and I unpack what's really happening in the world of global capability centers. We're living in unprecedented times, and most businesses aren't ready for what's coming. Many mistake using AI for simply adopting tools like ChatGPT without actually thinking about how their organizations operate. For example, how Ashish Vaswani has built RNJ model, their first open source model described as a world-class 8 billion base plus instruct pair. Or, for example, how companies are setting up their entire data value chain to acquire highly specialized expert data sets by setting up global capability centers in South Asia and South America. The real shift is happening elsewhere. Some companies are building their own models, others are embedding AI deeply into custom workflows. But many are securing long-term advantages around compute, energy, data, and most importantly, access to global talent. At the heart of it all is this: the future belongs to companies that can tap into the world's most capable, ambitious, and underutilized talent pools and turn them into a strategic advantage. In the GCC podcast, I sit down with operators, founders, and leaders to explore how the world's most important businesses are building global capability centers. Not just to cut costs, but to acquire proprietary data, develop custom AI systems, and transform their products, services, and workplaces into truly AI-native organizations. This is a podcast about how global businesses are being rebuilt from the inside out. So today, I wanted to sort of discuss something that is, arguably the most severe yet normalized crisis in America, which is our collapsing health, right? And we continue to talk in previous episodes about systems and infrastructure. And so this too, if you think about it, is almost systematic in nature. If a foreign adversary deployed some sort of, a bioweapon that made, let's say, 80% of our population overweight, we would genuinely consider that an existential national security threat. But this is happening from within. Right? We're living in an environment that systematically produces sick people. So today, I really wanted to uncover why the default health outcome in the US specifically is so poor, and how corporate culture, corporate capture, government subsidies created this toxic food system back in the 1970s, and all of that. So let's start at the root, right? This obesity and chronic sort of disease crisis is not a failure of individual willpower. It's more like the natural output of this environment. People constantly ask why America has an obesity problem, and why we are so sick. And we were talking about this earlier on, and you sort of argued that the answer is this very simple, almost trivial thing that has to do with the environment that we've built. So could you comment on that a little bit? Perhaps we can
I
start
think
there.
so. I'm in San Francisco, and I walk to eat something healthier. I have to walk for at least 4 or 5 kilometers, and still I'm unable to find a cafe which has something that I can eat comfortably. There is so much sugar, there's so much fructose syrup in everything, in every shop wherever you go. You just find it extremely hard to find something that is basically that's basically you feel comfortable about, which after eating you won't have any kind of guilt. So it's somehow the environment. We've shaped our environment where it's you can't be fit in that environment, because everything around you, even the stacks of pastries, the bread, wheat, corn, because they're subsidized by the governments. Can you imagine 20% of American caloric intake is coming from wheat, right? This is so somehow we have somehow stacked up the environment that's not fit for a good health culture. Literally, yesterday I walked for 6 kilometers. There was a cafe, and then there was a pizza shop, and then there was another cafe, and then another pizza shop, and then another cafe, and another pizza shop. And I just kept on walking for 5-6 kilometers, and I couldn't find something that I could eat. And I have this issue, like, for example, if I eat something unhealthier, then I have this guilt coming in.
And I also think, so this didn't happen randomly though, right? Like this timeline of our health decline tracks back to, as I mentioned, the 1970s, which was sort of driven by this pressure from shareholders on massive food conglomerates of that time. So was there a specific turning point where things started to
Yes.
escalate? And
So in 1970s, what happened was because of the shareholder value, these 150 or 100-year-old corporations started to do one thing that was very significant, and that was like they started to replace sugar with fructose syrup. And that's where your everyday food has had this fake sugar. Even the sugar in its purest form is not good, and now imagine it's a fake sugar, right? So that's where things started to fall apart. It just kept on destroying your mental health, physical health, your agency, your ability to think cognitively in a better way. So all that thing has just somehow started to fall apart. So that started to happen in 1970s, and one particular decision or happening that was like replacing sugar with fructose syrup, and that was a major turning point.
and I think also, like, so if we talk a little bit about the structural nature of all of this, I mean, government subsidies, for corn and you mentioned wheat and other things like soy and all of this. I think they make these inflammatory, high processed ingredients artificially cheap, right? And so if we wanted to pull sort of the biggest lever to fix this food crisis, regardless of political difficulty, what would you say on policy change?
Uh, I don't know about the policy, but I think in the last few decades, the U.S. government has spent $100 billion in subsidizing corn, soy, and wheat. Now imagine $100 billion in subsidizing these three things. And now every food corporation has big advantage of putting these three ingredients as a primary food component in everything they make. So today, the average American gets take most of their caloric intakes from these three things, not because it's good or because it's desired, but simply because the government makes it extremely cheap, and it just favors these big food corporations who use these things in a much higher proportion than, for example, something healthier or organic.
And then there's also, like, obviously in the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion around the universal Ozempic and GLP-1s and all of that. And I think that while they can, jumpstart weight loss, there's a misconception because they don't actually fix the root cause, right? Eating less of a toxic diet, simply leads to nutrient deficiency, right? So with almost like 80% of the country currently overweight or obese, why not just put everyone on a GLP-1 or
I mean,
something like that?
Ozempic is a very good technology to jumpstart, but I mean, it's not cure for all. I mean, what Ozempic essentially does, it turns down your appetite. But if you are eating the same highly processed garbage, and even if you're eating that in lesser quantity, then you're not having those macros and micros that are required for a healthier life or healthier cognitive and physical capabilities. So I think the core thing what we need to think about is we need to change our environment. I mean, think about, like, we are willing to do Ozempic, but we're not willing to change this garbage food that's around us, which every one of us, I think, is now want to change. Not here in the US, but even globally, because whatever is happening in the US, that's basically happens in the entire world, right? It happens in Pakistan, in Middle East. That's where the biggest all the ideas are coming from. So I think there's a lot of value in, for example, deploying AI systems in making better food choices. So I was in this mall here, and the guy had their cloud bot configured with their Meta glasses, and he was walking down that corridor and trying to pick things based on what his diet or what his opinion and his priorities are. I've seen his whole basket. He didn't pick any wrong thing. Right. So just think about it. Like, you have your Meta glasses up, and every time you have set up your cloud bot and Opal Cloud in a way that you start, like, you are not going to eat sugar, this. You need to, for example, go through every ingredient and all that. And then the cameras of Meta glasses are so good. I mean, it processes an incredible amount of text in split seconds, and then there's more, and there's a model, and it just gives you all the idea of all the better choices that you can have in those thousands of SKUs that are available in these Target stores. Now, if customers stop buying these things, eventually, I think the market would respond, and they would start creating better products, and products that are more beneficial for the health. Because at the end of the day, there is a demand for these things, right?
Yeah.
Even if you eat, I mean, because I travel a lot. I'm more of a nomad now, right? So I traveled. So in the last, I think for 1 year or so, I've traveled to I don't know how many countries.
Mm.
If you order a 12-inch pizza in US, New York, in San Francisco, it's double the size of what you order in, let's say, in Dubai or Riyadh, in Lahore. So the size of the products are too big as well. I mean, and then when you pick, it's a 1% serving or 2% serving. You can, I mean, people in our part of the world, they can eat, for example, the entire family can eat that 1% serving. Somehow, they, the, the markers are different, and that they need to be readjusted, I guess.
Yeah. And it's very true when they say, at the end of the day, like health and fitness and all of these things are very, very genuinely just a reflection of our environment. And so you've pointed out in the past that many of our issues sort of stem from this like disconnect or a mismatch between the environment and our gene makeup. Like for example, animals taken out of the wild, we are suffering from this mismatch between our genetics and the modern habitat that we have. And you use this like interesting analogy about like animals in the zoo. Could you sort of maybe walk us through that more?
So I was listening to this podcast from A16Z. That's why I picked it up from there. That if you move animals from away from zoo, what happens to them? They're not comfortable. That's not good for their health. So exactly, I mean, somehow in the last 40, 50 years, our environment is not. I mean, we're not in our natural zoo where we should be. I mean, and especially in an environment where our kids spend 70% time they're indoor, and that is basically, I mean, 50. I mean, our kids spend more time indoor than a prisoner who is sentenced to maximum prison in jail. And think about it, right? So somehow the whole structure, the social media, the overall things. I mean, somehow we have come to a culture and we've come to an environment where our health is not. I mean, think about, like, I was listening to David Sinclair, and it's true. Like, he's working on curing aging. Right? Just imagine there's one big thing, like, if you cure cancer today, it would add on an average increase human lifespan on an average 2.5 years. That's it. If you cure cancer in its entirety across the planet, it's not a very big change. Aging is a major disease, and we're doing a lot in reversing human aging process. And one of the core things of reversing human aging process is about how you structure your environment, how your cell responds to different kind of foods. Right. This is the core thing.
And so, you mentioned aging, and I've also recently been very slowly dipping my toes in this space. But I think if we talk about food specifically, the U.S. regulatory approach is, to essentially allows thousands of these toxic compounds into our food system. And just for perspective, most of these things are very, very strictly banned in Europe. So it seems like Europe doesn't have this problem to at least to the same degree, right? So what's the difference between how the US and the EU?
So US has this standard called GRAS, like generally recognized as safe. So for example, if you're introducing a new compound, all you have to share this to FDA, like, this is recognized as safe, and that's it. No, nothing is required. I mean, this is one of the area where regulation have to be put in place, and where it's not. I mean, otherwise, I think in every case, as compared to Europe, US is doing an incredible job in not putting much of the regulations. But here, I think there should be regulations. So this GRAS standard and the very lenient implementation of this has somehow produced 60 to 80,000 chemical compounds in our food that were not even that didn't exist before. Those 60 to 80,000 compounds are not available in the US food products, in the EU food products, and they have in the US. And that's the difference. Is, like, imagine 80,000 chemical compounds in your food products that should not be there at the first place.
And I also think, like, this is then where money sort of enters the conversation, right? There's like massive these agriculture and chemical companies who are using their wealth to lobby for almost like these liability shields, right? And to be able to influence these dietary guidelines. So given how harmful these 60 to 80,000 chemicals and processed foods and all of these things are, why hasn't like the government or the free market corrected this? Like, why haven't
They
this?
would. I think. I mean, it's easier to criticize like do all these big food co-ops and all that. That's how capitalism works. And I think if you have some great idea and if you think you have some innovation where how you can uh, produce these mass scale products while making sure they're healthier for everyone. I mean, you just need a presentation and a pitch deck, and you present to these big businesses, and they will invest a lot. The real thing is like the innovation is slower than in this space than it has to be. So I don't buy this thing like, for example, only for profits. It's somehow our pace of innovation in this area is very slow when it comes to food and all that stuff. So, and currently I've seen some of the companies who are investing a lot in preventive healthcare, but I mean, not a very groundbreaking work, but things have started to. I mean, innovation has somehow started to take some root. But let's see. I mean, I strongly believe AI implementation of AI in these kind of in these in these kind of hard problems. I think there's a lot of there can be a lot of value can be extracted here if you deploy AI. Just like say for even smaller things like how you shift demand. For example, if you make it this easier, wearing these AI devices and making people and making enabling people to make better choices in real time, just in time. What are the other things like how can you, for example, if those 60 to 80,000 compounds should not be there at the first place, okay, what are the compounds, what are the things that should be there at the first place? Okay, if you're not subsidizing wheat, then how can you, if you're not subsidizing wheat, corn, okay, then how, what's the alternative? Then it would get expensive. So these are the problems, not because like shareholder value and all that stuff. It's more like somehow it requires a lot of innovation like SpaceX kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's obviously like stories about companies like large companies like spending millions to influence nutrition guidelines. But I think all those things on one side, I think I enjoyed the response you gave me, because there is a lot of work that is, I think, at the cusp of being genuinely valuable to this space, especially around AI, medical
Major
research.
challenge in this point is, at this point is like in 1900s the world population was close to a billion. Today it's close to 8 billion. If you produce organic food through organic means, purely organic means, probably we won't be able to feed everyone.
Yeah,
So you
that's
need to find ways. But I think that now we have the tools and technologies where we can find ways to, I'm not saying organic, but for example, that food products to which our metabolic system respond better.
I also think like, so you mentioned mental health like a little bit ago nearer to the start. I think let's talk about that a little bit, because it's deeply tied to our biological health, right? And fixing the health of your gut and reducing inflammation inside your body, research has shown, will almost, in most cases, outperform talk therapy, or when you go to a therapist and you sort of do all of those things, which is also obviously great. But I think let's talk about the mental health piece, because we're obviously facing like this massive mental health crisis alongside this very big physical one. Are these two connected? We know they are, but
There's a
how?
field called
Yeah.
there's a field called metabolic psychiatry. Yes, they're, I mean, they're almost the one thing. Uh, Metabolic psychiatry is the idea that disease like depression, schizophrenia have root in metabolic causes, and there are lots of evidences where fixing your diet directly impact your mental health. So yeah, I mean, by the way, I have experienced some of these things myself as well. I have a journey to show how this impact your mental health. Uh, I mean, uh, you can't perform cognitive. Your cognitive function should be incredibly well if you, let's say, want to build a company. If you are an entrepreneur, so I was listening to uh, Bill Ackman. He was saying that he was doing uh, in this. It was a very hard time in his journey of building, I think, Perishing Square. And he was thinking about like he had these two things every day. One, how he can be. He didn't think much about the future. He thought of like how he can be 1% better than yesterday. That was his thing. And second, just be healthy. right? Because if you have these two things, somehow it compounds over time. Even after 12 months, you'll be in a different thing. You will be in a different shape. So health is incredibly important. If you are going after things that are generally considered extremely hard. And why health is important? Because you're required to have that cognitive function, have that emotional stability over a long period of time. If you are pursuing something hard, so yeah, it's both physical and mental health is almost the one thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think most of us have also sort of experienced, it's not that you'll kind of, it's not as trivial as, oh, I'm eating this, therefore I am, depressed or something. It's just you kind of notice the improvement when you start eating better, right? That's what it is. Um, so let's talk a little bit about this from a business perspective as well, and maybe like a way forward point of view as well. The current healthcare system only pays for disease management, right? If you think about it, like, it pays for what to do once you are sick. It doesn't sort of incentivize prevention. So we know that in that sense, the system is broken. The environment is toxic, and the government, at the end of the day, is subsidizing the wrong things. So how do we actually fix this from a business perspective? And what
So,
is what is a good
so
model for?
think about it. Like if you are at a risk of a heart disease, you pay out of your pocket for a gym and a good food to prevent it, right? But if you do nothing and have a heart attack, the healthcare system spends millions in managing your condition for life. But that's entirely backward. So I think there are a lot of value in uh, uh, interventionist technologies, preventive technologies. Companies like TrueMed, they're doing incredible work. Uh, but there are only a handful of companies. But yes, I think uh, uh, there are so. But the challenge is it's hard. I mean, uh, we can prioritize. Like, for example, if I'm an insurance company, I'll prioritize that my people should like people who have the insurance with us. They go to gym and all that stuff. It's not like that they can't pay, and that's the reason they don't go to gym. Here in the US, you would find a gym in almost every street,
Yeah,
but you won't find people there. Just going to gym is hard,
it is.
right? Not eating these yummy food, not eating pizzas, not eating pastries. It is hard. It's a hard thing to do, right? And if you are not used to of pursuing hard things, if you're not used to of resisting the temptations, then probably you are in a problem. Of course, your environment would play a very active role, but then of course you have to play an active role too. And it's a skill that you need to learn, that how to do it, how to resist these temptations.
Mm, mm, mm. It's also like, so then at the end of the day, like, where does this leave the individual then? Because when it comes to like when it comes to like personal optimization, there is so much advice out there. Like you have, this people like Brian Johnson, that millionaire is very bullish on pushing plant-based caloric restriction and those kinds of things. But that's a very like niche, I guess, approach to take. So, are there other schools of thought you find more compelling? And talk to us a little bit about that.
I think most things exist in spectrum.
Mm,
There's a value to plant-based diet.
mm,
Of course, I'm not expert in that,
mm,
but what I've gathered is like there's a lot of value in grandmother wisdom. Our grandparents, and they didn't have an access to these strawberries and pastries, and they had a very good life. Like
yeah,
my grandmother died at the age of 97, and she was very good. The day she died, she earlier in the day she was just hanging around, and she was walking and talking to all of us, and she was very good. And she died at the age of 97. And I think one day before her death, she had a proper meal, all three meals.
mm,
But one thing was like, it's not like that what she had to eat. It's like what she never ate. So for example, she never ate sugar. She things like that, things that were not even available before. Sugar was a very restrictive thing in the earlier days. Only when the guests used to come in the house, only they
mm,
get to have something sugary. Otherwise,
yeah,
it wasn't the case. So, so I think we don't need to be Brian Johnson. We just need to be normal human beings and just
yeah,
try to avoid things like these fructose syrup, these cookies and strawberries, uh, and then we'll be okay. 97 is a good age, I guess.